Did he ever coerce or threaten people?
That's not something we're alleging. It's a little simpler than that. With regard to the victimization, the 12 of them relate to his relationship with a longtime friend of his, Russell Taylor. That explains that. Russell Taylor does work for his foundation. They are old friends. With regard to the other two, he's taking advantage of ways of obtaining child prostitution.
Are there any other possible victims?
Named in the court documents, they only believe to be the only two underage girls at Fogle.
Minor victim 13 and 14 were underage at the time of the sexual activity with him.
Is it believed to be any additional victims, or?
Those are the two we've been able to identify through that wide-ranging investigation that we did.
Is there any evidence the Jared Foundation was used by Taylor selecting these alleged victims?
Not directly. No, nothing to do with the work of the Jared Foundation has anything to do with the child prostitution here, except that sometimes he would do that while traveling on foundation business. But in no event was he using the foundation to get at the child prostitutes.
Mr. Bingle, can you explain to the, Mr. Bingle, can you explain?
He had not participated in apparently worked out an agreement with you?
In essence, no. I mean, we have 14 victims, and if you look at the charging documents, we've considered what happened to all 14 victims. In federal court, the number of counts doesn't always make a huge difference. There's enough statutory exposure here at 50 years to get a sentence of the type we would recommend. So we didn't cut him any breaks. As the U.S. Attorney said, this is the deal you get if you do this, whether you're rich or not.
Did you get any indication from the victims that they were bowled over by his celebrity status?
A lot of them didn't know who he was. Some of them did. They didn't know they'd been victims. With regard to a lot of the victims in Indiana, they had no idea they're being filmed. So they had to wake up one day and find out they'd been sexually exploited because they happened to be at somebody's house changing clothes, showering, whatever. So it made it all the worse that that's happening with a famous person, because it draws attention to what they've had to go through. This is one of the reasons why they need such high restitution, why we really made it a priority to get him home.
Mr. Bingle, can you explain to the public why someone of this caliber is allowed to walk out of the federal courthouse in Indianapolis and is not sitting in the Marion County Jail?
Certainly, and that's a good question. We believe that Mr. Fogle should not be treated any better, or any worse in this investigation, in this prosecution, or how it is handled in federal court. This is the recommendation we would make on bond on anybody that did this, whether it's Jared Fogle or not. So we believe that he should be treated no better and no worse than anybody else based on his status.
Is there any indication when he was making those trips to New York City, he was doing those on behalf of Subway? Was he making appearances for the company?
He was doing this primarily on business travel, and without distinguishing between whether it's Foundation or Subway. He's taking advantage of being on business travel to do this when he's otherwise doing business events.
Can you go back over the comments? You said some of this activity predated his association with Taylor, at least Taylor with the Foundation.
Right. If you look at the charging document, you'll see an allegation that we say Mr. Fogle's activity seeking out underage minors for sex starts in around 2007. And specifically, he communicated about that starting in around 2007 with people who were not prostitutes, describing that activity. That's in paragraph 45 and 46 of the charging document that lays that out. With regard to the solicitation of that we have within the text messages we have, that's, as the U.S. Attorney said, that's around 2010.
Steve, the plea agreement leaves open the possibility that if you discover other criminality there, that charges could be filed. Are you satisfied that you have, plumbed the depths of his illegal behavior, or is there still things out there?
Well, first off, this agreement, you're correct, was carefully drafted so that if something else emerges, I can do something about that. I can hold him responsible for that. We can file more charges. However, the reason why we looked at all of those thousands of text messages and pictures and all of those devices was to try to get as much certainty as possible. Okay, I can tell you that the investigators here read a lot of those text messages 2 and 3 times and looked at these pictures in some cases for a long period of time to try to figure out who all we had pictures of. I'm fairly confident, other than the 14 victims we have here, we don't have any other victim we can identify through the evidence we've recovered, having looked at all of it very exhaustively. So what we would need at this point is someone to come forward and say, me too, it happened to me as well, and then we'd investigate that. But one of the things we felt we owed everyone was certainty on what happened and what didn't happen, and that's our answer. There are 14 victims here, and that's what we charged him with.
Steve,
So is it possible there are other victims out there, but you've just not been able to identify?
I'll say this, in the time period we have a lot of evidence for, I doubt it, because we have a lot of evidence of what he's doing and not doing in those periods of time. There's a lot of coverage in those cell phones and text messages, so it would have to be something farther back in time, older than our evidence has easy access to, like a long time ago kind of thing.
Steve,
Did the
you
criminal activity
investigate.
end with Taylor's arrest, or did it continue after Taylor's arrest?
As we say in the charging document, it goes on after Taylor's arrest. You'll see that the end date of Mr. Fogle's activities in June of 2015.
Can you explain what that was then for the next 2 months that he was engaged in?
It's more of count 2, but not successfully.
Steve, you investigate these kinds of crimes. Removing Mr. Fogle, is this the typical way that people try to hide the child pornography, the amount of discs you recovered, the computers? Is this typical in a case like this, or is this above that, sir?
Unfortunately, with cheap storage media and lots of places you can put videos and images, it's more common now. We see things on small storage devices, laptops, computers, cell phones, cameras. So now what we do is we use on-scene computer forensic triage. This is what the state police in particular specializes in. We have a mobile forensic laboratory we pull up at the house and start looking at that stuff in real time. That's how, as many of you know, we did the Fogle search. Okay. We go through all of that media to make sure we're not missing any victims. And unfortunately, because storage media gets so big and so cheap, this is getting increasingly more difficult for law enforcement to keep track of. In Indiana, we're fortunate because we have this capability. If Mr. Fogle had lived in a lot of other places in the country, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Because,
Jared is
explain that, please. Why is that?
Because they don't have mobile forensic laboratories, they don't have the Indiana State Police, they don't have a vibrant federal-local partnership, state partnership, they don't have an Internet Crimes Against Children task force that's effective, they don't have a lot of experienced people.
Thank you.
Okay.
Fogle is shown a willingness and ability to travel for this. Or is there any concern of, okay, you have an electronic monitoring device, that he won't leave, assuming he still has the assets to maybe leave?
I don't think he's going anywhere. If he does, we'll catch him, we'll arrest him, and I'll prosecute him some more. Okay. In making bond arguments and decisions, I've been involved in maybe 500 cases like this. Okay, and there are people worse than Jared Fogle in jail right now, and there are people less worse than Jared Fogle not in jail right now. And at the end of the day, we only have so many places we can put prisoners. We have to make good decisions. Okay. He knew this investigation was coming when Taylor was arrested in April of 2015. He didn't flee. He had all the opportunity to, and knew we were coming, I would think. So if he didn't flee in that period of time, and he negotiates a plea and signs this document and agrees to pay $1.45 million to victims, I think he probably is going to stay around. But if not, we'll find him. I don't think Jared can flee very far without getting recognized.
Mr. Fogle's
Thank you very much. One more question.
Mr. Fogle's attorney said today that his client has a medical condition. He's well aware that he knows that he has this condition. Do you consider that what he did was because of a medical condition?
They're going to present all of that to the judge at sentencing. I haven't seen what they're talking about yet. What we know is we know what his criminal conduct is, and we've made our charging decisions based on what we believe he did and now what he's admitted he did. Down the road, they can make mitigation arguments if they want to and talk about all of that. But we're not ready to respond to any of that yet. I need to see what they're talking about.
Steve, as this investigation was playing out, there were media reports that surfaced that former Subway franchise owner may have shared texts with Subway management from Fogle saying that he had had sex with a 16-year-old. Is Subway facing any investigation about not reporting related to this?
So our charges are against Jared Fogle, not against Subway. And let me say, Jared Fogle is not a Subway employee anymore, and there are thousands of Subway employees around the world that are probably equally appalled right now, okay? So the question of what that franchisee said or didn't say to the Subway people is not something that's been part of our charging package here. Fogle doesn't tell, when we met with him, we did meet with Fogle, he said nobody tipped me that there was anything serious going on here that caused me to quit my behavior. So we don't think that process, as that witness may or may not have described it, successfully worked in terms of preventing Fogle from doing anything or encouraging him to do anything. So right now, obviously we still investigate all of those questions, but there are no charges or allegations right now that anybody at Subway knew he was doing all of these things and decided to let him do that for some crazy reason. Okay?
Okay, folks, thank you very much. Thank you.